Hey there, fight fans. So, UFC 281 has come and gone, and I hope you are not among those who place your hopes or your money on Israel Adesanya, because if you were, it may not have been a good night. But take heart, there will be other cards to come along, and hopefully you can recover in those next cards. Now, I thought, in my opinion, that UFC 281 presented the rare opportunity to really make some money on a UFC card. You see, the problem is with UFC cards is that most cards are filled with fighters that you barely know anything about. Dagestani fighters, you know, British fighters, European fighters, fighters coming off the circuit that you know very little about. And you never want to bet on a fight where you don't know the fighter, you don't know how to fight. The best types of fighters to bet on are fighters whose style you know very well, who fight in a somewhat dominant fashion, and who consistently live up to their fighting styles. Because you don't want to fight a guy who's known for his stand-up game and all of a sudden he takes the other guy down like, dude, what are you doing? So when you find a card where those dominant fighters are several on the card, and not only that, but the opponents that they're fighting are people who you almost know are going to lose the fight, those are good fights to jump on. Now, I base my reference on UFC 276. For UFC 276, I had Israel Adesanya versus Cannonier. I had Israel Adesanya. I had Max Holloway versus Alexander Volkanovski. I had Volkanovski. And there was Michael Pereira versus Sean Strickland. I had Michael Pereira. For those three fights, I was pretty confident in each of the guys that I picked. Israel Adesanya, Volkanovski, and Michael Pereira. In the Pereira-Strickland fight, I knew there was almost a zero chance of Sean Strickland winning that fight. And so you could have gone to one way where you could have said, listen, I'll just bet a lot of money on this one particular fight because it has the highest probability of a win. Or you could parlay them into three, spend a little less money, but make as much money on the back end, right? And that's how I went, and I won $1,600 on that fight, which was wonderful. Now, so my philosophy is to keep your parlays to a 3-fighter minimum. And I know the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 fighter is, exciting and it gets all the headlines when that 50-cent parlay turns into a $75,000 win. But honestly, how common is that? That's extremely uncommon. It's better to not be as flashy or as greedy and try to get that huge pot and stick with what you know is probably more apt to happen with your 3-fighter minimum. So for this card, UFC 281, the fighters that I thought, the first fight that I thought was a zero possibility fight was the Weili Zhang versus Carla Esparza. I knew there was almost zero chances, zero paths to victory for Carla Esparza. Weili Zhang was more physical, more explosive, more dominating, more quicker. I mean, every box that you could win the fight in, Weili Zhang checked. Remember, a couple of years ago, Carla Esparza fought Joanna Jędrzejczyk and got destroyed. I mean, that was one of the most lopsided beatdowns I've ever seen in any arena. She just absolutely manhandled Carla Esparza. Carla Esparza is not really a physical fighter. So I knew going against Weili Zhang is going to be extremely difficult for her to win. I was very confident in that fight. The other fight I was very confident in was, for this card, was the Gutierrez versus Frankie Edgar. Let's be honest, Frankie Edgar is a living legend. No doubt about that, all respect to him. But there was almost not a 1% chance even of Frankie Edgar winning this fight. It was a complete lost cause. So there were two almost zero chances fights on that card, which is huge for a parlay. The third fight that I was very confident in was Michael Pereira versus Israel Adesanya. Now, I know the fight went the distance, and up until the knockout, I actually thought that was a losing bet. I was like, he's lost. Michael Pereira has lost this fight. Israel Adesanya is a champion, and he's putting it to him up until the end. It looked like he had lost the fight up until vintage Pereira style. He knocks out Adesanya. So those three fights, right? They may not have had a extremely attractive odds, like maybe like 1,300 or 1,500 or something like that, but they were fights. They were almost 100% due to go your way. So you could have gone big dog and dropped a lot of money on those fights, or go small and still win a decent amount, and you would have walked out with a very nice weekend. The problem I made with this card is I included Dominic Reyes, which was a huge mistake. So that's another mistake I made too. One of the things that I do that I found that I've got to stop doing is becoming emotionally attached to the fighters. You should just bet a fight simply because you think the fighter has a great chance to win, not because you like the fighter or you like his style. I did the same thing with Thiago Santos. I love Thiago Santos as a fighter. He's one of my favorite fighters of all time. But he's not the Thiago Santos that we knew he was before, right? And with Dominic Reyes in this fight, I'm thinking, he should win the fight, but I made another big mistake. I was not very aware of Ryan Spann. And you should not bet a fight if you're not too sure about the fighter. So anyway, I lost that parlay, and I'm not a winner for this UFC. So, in conclusion, I would say that what I would do in the future, my style again is, like I said, stick to your 3-fighter minimum. Make sure that you're aware of how these fighters fight. I'm sorry, let me bounce around for another moment. Another name to add to this list is Carlos Ulberg. Carlos Ulberg fought on the prelims. If you know this guy has had like 4 or 5 spectacular fights. I mean, each fight he even outlives the hype from the fight before, which is very difficult to do, right? So, and I believe this last fight has put him on the main stage. He's not going to be a prelim fighter anymore. This guy belongs, and he's an exciting, fun to watch fighter, and he delivers big time every time. So that was another guy you could have added to your parlay to make a very, very nice weekend. Even Dustin Poirier. Now, the thing about Dustin Poirier is I was a little wary. 1, because Michael Chandler's no joke. And 2, fighters who are been fighting for a while are sometimes pretty risky. You know what I mean? If it's a fighter who's coming into his own, for example, Jiri Prochazka, I'm pretty sure Jiri Prochazka is going to win several fights for the next several years. I don't think there's any chance of that not happening. So he's entering his prime. Whereas somebody like Poirier is kind of on the downside of his prime. So you're never really sure if they're going to come with that same vintage Poirier fashion, or something's going to happen, they're going to fall off. So I wasn't too sure on that fight. Even though I felt he might win, I was not 100% sure. But the other fights I was. Now, what I would say is the next fight coming up very soon, is Jiri Prochazka. Hopefully there will be some other people on that card who has that same type of style, dominant fashion, well-known fighters, very strong mentally. And if they do, that's the chance to jump on that. We'll see. But I hope you made some money on this last UFC. That's the name of the game that we're all trying to do. Let's see what happens with who Michael Pereira faces next. And let's see what happens with Jiri Prochazka. Those 2 guys, in my opinion, are the 2 best money-making guys in the UFC right now. But we'll see. Thank you for watching.